Welcome to Good Humans podcast, Missy Robinson. How you going, Missy?
I'm fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming over to my little place here on the Gold Coast. It's been a very busy morning for me. I've got a lot going on, so I appreciate you being able to just jump into my shit show of a life right now and sit down for a bit of a chat because you have a fascinating story. You're a cuddle therapist, which we're going to catch up to that part of your story,
Yes.
which is very exciting. You were saying you're going to do a live interview with the Today Show later this week.
Yes, very exciting. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to doing that. I've done a lot of media and stuff, but this will be the first time I'll sort of be on TV for it. So it'll be good to be able to share my experiences and talk about it.
Yeah, live TV is scary. I do a lot of speaking, obviously. I'm very comfortable speaking. Yeah. But the one live TV thing that I did with not the project, with Studio 10, like Channel 10's
yeah.
Was like the most nervous I've ever been.
Really? I mean, there's no live audience or anything, but I'm prepared for it. Like I've been on the news and stuff before, but I am prepared for the fact that it's probably going to be a different experience. And I'm doing an actual live demonstration as well. So it's not just the interview. I'm actually going to be cuddling the hosts as well. So
no way.
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated to catch up to the cuddling part of your story, but you've got a really fascinating journey. I mean, you go on your social media, you've got an incredible weight loss journey, losing over 60 kilos,
yes.
which is just crazy.
I know.
Which I'm sure there's going to be some people listening who can be really inspired by that journey and get some tips and tricks from your journey. You also told me before we started recording that you're in the army, you're in the
and really force. That's kind of where my story really sort of starts, I guess you could say. So I had done Army Cadets when I was in high school and I absolutely loved it. Like I was very much a tomboy at school and my mum actually got me into Army Cadets. It wasn't something that I had been looking for, but once I joined, I absolutely fell in love and realized that was very much the career that I wanted for myself.
Wow.
So I applied for the scholarship to go to the Australian Defence Force Academy and I was one of the 80 Australia-wide that was awarded the scholarship. So it was like a dream come true for me. So I went down to the Australian Defence Force Academy in Canberra. Unfortunately, 3 weeks into my training, I was sexually assaulted by a corporal in the military police. So that completely changed everything for me. I'd never had any negative experiences with males in the past, never had any negative experiences with people in authority as well. And it was a very confusing time for me because I was very isolated. So during the first 6 weeks of training, you don't have access to your family. You're very much locked and loaded at the academy. No phone calls out, no phone calls in, none of that sort of stuff. So I was the 19-year-old girl who basically had to deal with this huge thing that had happened to me all by myself.
Wow.
And it was really hard. And it was as much as he was charged and all that sort of stuff and he pled guilty and all that sort of stuff. So I made sure that I had always been taught that if someone does the wrong thing by you, you stand up and you stand up for yourself. So I did that and that helped. But the military is a very interesting place. And it wasn't that it's not like it was not frowned upon, but I was very much treated differently because of the fact that I stood up for myself, which is fucking crazy, right? Absolutely crazy. I managed to stick it out for another 8 months, but it was just too challenging for me. I continued doing what I was doing. I was really, really good at it. I was a natural born leader, but everyone knew that this thing had happened to me and I was treated differently as a result. And obviously being in a male-dominated environment, it was very, very hard for me to sort of then forge my lifelong career out of it. So I left.
Wow. Well, we're going to rewind and then we're going to go back through that story a little bit more in depth and then we're going to catch up to your weight loss journey, how I guess the weight came on. I'm sure it has a lot to do with the trauma.
Yeah.
And then we're going to catch up to cuddle therapy. But I always do open Good Humans podcast with the same question. So what are you grateful for right now, today in life?
Being alive. I'm grateful for the life that I've created for myself. I'm grateful for the fact that I can I'm the fact that I woke up because I've had so many experiences where I didn't want to wake up.
Wow. Well, I'm very grateful you're here too. And I'm grateful you get to share your story because I'm sure there's going to be someone listening who has gone through something maybe similar, maybe something different, but also very challenging where they thought, tomorrow wasn't worth getting to. And hopefully this chat can, inspire them to recognize that, in the future, in the hopefully not too distant future, there's brighter days ahead and there's
absolutely
help out there and there's people who have overcome big challenges. So thank you for sharing that gratitude. Let's go back to the start. Where'd you grow up? What was life like as a kid? Because, before you get to the army, you thought it was going to be this amazing, big, beautiful future. Your mum encouraged you to go there. So, what was your upbringing like?
So I'm an only child raised by a single mother. I was born in Sydney And when I was 2 years old, my mum and I moved back to New Zealand, which is where her family is from. And I spent my childhood growing up there. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, very, very close with my grandma and my granddad. I was blessed to be able to have that opportunity and that time with them when I was younger, and I still hold that very, very close to my heart. We moved back to Australia when I was 10 because there were much more opportunities in Australia than there were in New Zealand. And I grew up in the small beach town of Bargara, Bundaberg, which is like 5 hours north of here. Wow. So I had an amazing childhood. I was being an only child, I was never spoiled. Like I had a lot more restrictions than probably a lot of my friends. But I was grateful for everything that sort of was handed to me and what I was able to experience, because I did have a blessed childhood. I got to holiday in Lake Taupo, which is this beautiful part of New Zealand. I got to spend time on the boat with my grandparents, trout fishing, water skiing, some incredible things that not many people would get to experience as a kid. So I was really lucky. So yeah, joining the army was just kind of like the next thing for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing for a young, woman to be not pushed towards, but to be sort of encouraged, especially by your parent. I feel like it's crazy.
Yeah,
army and stuff scares me. So yeah, why did your mum recommend army?
I was always very adventurous. Like I didn't have a lot of fear as a kid. I think because of the fact that I trusted life. I trusted the people that I was spending time with, my family and stuff like that. And I had these opportunities like water skiing, trout fishing, spending time on the Lake Taupo, that kind of stuff. So I think that was sort of a bit of an opener for my mum to sort of go, well, clearly she likes this sort of thing. So I did dancing when I was younger. I was allowed to have 2 extracurricular activities. The first one was dancing, which I chose. And the second one, mum was like, I think you should do Army Cadets. And she actually tricked me to go along to the information night when I was like 13, grade 8. And I was hooked from day one.
Did she have any military background or anything? No family military?
No, nothing like that. I think the routine, structure and discipline, I wasn't an unruly kid by any means, but I think she just knew that would be good for me. And like none of my friends did Army Cadets or anything. So I was very much the odd one out, but I thrived. Like I absolutely thrived. I loved it.
So what does Army Cadets look like? What age was that when you first got introduced to it?
13. So it was grade 8 to grade 12. So you learn, every Monday afternoon after school, I'd get into my camouflage uniform and we'd have our like rituals and all that sort of stuff. So there was. At
your school?
At my high school, yeah. So it was
your high school.
It was all high schools around Bundaberg that would go along. Hinkler 18 RCU it was called. And we had ex-military guys who were obviously training us and all that sort of stuff. We'd have bivouacs where we'd go away for weekends. We'd learn to shoot. We'd learn to,
that was an extracurricular at school. So your Bundaberg school wasn't an army school.
No, nothing like that.
You could apply from 13 to join like.
Yeah, so anyone, I'm pretty sure they still do cadets now, but if you're in grade 8 and you want to sort of do Army, Navy, Air Force, there are cadets where you can sort of get that experience.
Okay, like a little introductory while you're through
very
high school
much so.
What it would be like. So and when you were doing that, you were like, okay, this is my after school. When I finish school, I'm going to go.
Yep, very much so. Throughout my cadets, like through grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, 11, 12, I continued to get better. So I was promoted every single year. So I went from Army Cadet to, Lance Corporal to Sergeant to Parade Commander and all that sort of stuff. So it was very much the career trajectory that I wanted for myself. And
was your goal to like go and, not go to war. No one who's in the army wants to go to war.
I was prepared to fight for my country, 100%. I was prepared to die for my country, 100%. And, when you get enlisted into the Australian Army, you have to, sign a pledge and all that sort of stuff to say that you're okay with that as well. And I was very much okay with that.
Yeah, wow.
Which is bizarre. It is a bizarre concept, but anyone who's joined the military has the exact same thing.
Yeah. So then you finish high school and you're like, sweet, I'm going to go straight into this.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the year after high school, because I partied grade 11 and 12, like most 16, 17-year-olds do, I didn't meet the OP requirements to go to AD for that first year. So I ended up I moved to Brisbane and did 1 year at UQ. Absolutely hated it because I didn't want to be there. I just basically partied the whole year. And then I got a phone call in August from the Defence Academy saying, hey, look, University of New South Wales have dropped the OP requirements. Because you're a scholarship winner, you get first pick. And I was like, fucking see ya, I'm gone. So I dropped out of UQ and went to AD for the following year. So in Queensland, when you have your high school, you do like, you have to do these test to sort of
Okay,
allocate.
so it wasn't like an academic.
Yeah, it was an academic
requirement.
thing.
You
Yeah.
didn't hit the
I can't remember what
academic.
OP stands for, but there were certain requirements to get into university degrees.
Yeah, okay.
So that's
because
what
you have
that
to study a
was.
university degree under the army.
Yeah,
though.
so at ADFA, you're not going in as general entry, you're going in as officer training. So it's slightly different. So if I had have graduated, I would have been a lieutenant.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
in
you
the
go
army.
to army university basically.
Yeah, so at ADFA as its own academy
Yeah.
down in Canberra, and then it's across the road from the Royal Military College Duntroon,
So what
which
it?
is
Australian Defence Force Academy.
Australian Defence Force Academy. Yeah, so it's Triforce. So they have Navy, Army, and Air Force.
Yeah.
You study university there, which is through the University of New South Wales, and then you get all of your military training, but it's all on base.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where I guess that part of your journey started, at that training university. Because a friend of mine's just signed up for the army. And I don't know if he has to do like the uni version of it, or is that
No,
only
so
if you want
it's-
to do a certain part that's more in the...
Yeah, so most people who go general entry, they just go in as diggers. You just
Yeah.
do straight military training.
Yeah.
But to do an officer training, which was
Okay.
obviously to be in charge, commissioned
Yeah.
officers, you have to do ADFA or RMC, yeah.
Okay. So you go down to Canberra.
Yep.
And then that's where the story that we picked up before.
Yeah,
so
that's
you go in as
right.
this young girl ready to, take on the world, to serve her country.
Mm-hmm.
And then that happens.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to go into it, but can you remember much from that sort of period of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I remember like because it was the first 6 weeks were our lockdown training. So like I said, we had no contact with family. It was basically 24/7. They were drilling you into, that mindset and what have you.
Mhm.
And they tell us that we're the top 5% of youth in Australia. So there was very much this elitist attitude that we all sort of developed, and it's very, very common in the Defence Forces. So during those first 6 weeks, you do common military training. So whether you're Army, Navy or Air Force, you have to do all the same basic training, which is very similar to what I did in the Army cadets.
Mhm.
So I sort of knew all that sort of stuff. So we were learning how to shoot, we were learning first aid, we were learning military history, like all that sort of stuff. And my assault happened when I was out on a bivouac doing training after the first 3 weeks. So my enlistment date was January the 19th. The assault happened on Valentine's Day, February the 14th.
It's just like, yes.
And my 20th birthday was March 7th. So
How many other young women were there in your group? Was it quite...
So in my section, like during that particular incident, I was the only female in my section.
Yes,
And where I was living, the accommodations, I was the only female in my wing. So we had our own rooms, but there was myself and 3 other males on like our own floor. We shared a bathroom, and that's how it was. So there weren't that many females at all.
Yeah, it's just like, it's just so heavy. And then after the incident, like I don't want to make you relive the incident, but...
Oh, I've gone through trauma exposure therapy. I'm totally cool talking about. I mean, I don't need to talk about the details, but the biggest thing I think was the fact that, that they didn't try and keep it. Yeah, they didn't try and keep it quiet or anything. I think the thing that upset me the most, and that I still struggle to deal with to this day, is the fact that he should never have been there in the first place. So at the time, this is 1998, Australia was over in Afghanistan and Iraq doing peacekeeping and what have you. So they had a lot of the high-ranking officers were actually being deployed. And as a result, they didn't have the officers available at the academy to do the training. So they got non-commissioned officers in. Now, the difference between commissioned officers and non-commissioned officers is a ranking situation. So non-commissioned is like lance corporal, that kind of thing. Whereas commissioned officers are kind of like lieutenant, captain, that kind of thing. They got a lot more experience. So as a result of that, they had these non-commissioned officers come from various other barracks around Australia. So they didn't have the skills. They didn't really have the experience or the qualifications to be doing what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. And then, at one of your things, how quickly after the incident did you report it, and what
Immediately.
was
Immediately. And there was no question for me. Like, I mean, it couldn't be avoided. Like, it was pretty obvious what had happened. Like, we don't need to go into specific details, but the one thing I did, I made sure I asked for a civilian lawyer, because everything needed to be, they wanted to try and keep everything within
in-house,
within the academy. And I was like, well, I don't know anyone. I've been here for 3 weeks. I don't know any of you people. I don't trust anyone. Like, I need a civilian lawyer. So they did give me a civilian lawyer. He pled guilty to all, I think there was like 11 charges or something relating to the assault. And that was it. But there's still this mentality within the Defence Force, like you shouldn't be ragging on your mates kind of thing. But it's like, well, fuck, what he did had nothing to do with my military service. That should never have happened. It should never have happened, period, let alone at that place by a person who's a corporal in the military police of all people.
Oh, it's just like, it's sickening how, opportunistic these,
So I mean, like,
are.
I think the next thing that I've really struggled with was when we had the hearing, because there was no like court case like or anything like that. It was like a military hearing. There were other people in my section who had to give statements. And they were kind of like, oh, I don't hear anything, they all shut their mouths. And my attitude, even as a 19-year-old girl, was just like, how the fuck can you guys be training to lead people and to defend the country when you can't even stand up for your mates? Like there was a lot of things about human behavior that really surprised me, shocked me, and I struggled to deal with.
And it just must be like, you're one of the strong ones who could speak up. Imagine how many cases there are that are brushed under the rug that are like, I worked on as a plumber a couple of years ago, years and years ago now. And I just remember it really clearly. One of the tradesmen was like my age, like early 20s. And I was like, oh, what you doing? He's like, I used to be in the Navy, but I left because there's all this fucked up shit would go on. Like one of my mates got sexually assaulted by one of the corporals, and then it got brushed under the rug, and then he committed suicide. And then we all tried to talk up, and we just got told like, oh, no, like it just doesn't go anywhere if it just stays internal in the Defence Force. And it just kind of like, which must happen so often. So
and I think I learned later on that there had been incidences where this guy had been inappropriate with other females, not to the extent of obviously what had happened to me, but they had been inappropriate and they didn't pipe up or say anything until after the fact. So I went through a bit of, I guess, I was dealing with some very confusing emotions because as someone who was always like, if you see something, say something, I couldn't understand how these girls didn't have the courage or strength. I do as an adult, I understand now, but at the time it was very confusing because my attitude then was, well, if you girls had have said something, this wouldn't have happened to me. And that is it's a real catch-22 because I could never victim blame, and I don't ever victim blame. I understand why people don't speak up, but with my instance, because they didn't speak up, it happened to me.
Yeah, it's just, it's so sad and so heavy. But the other thing for you is like, you've since 13, 14 years old, wanted to be in the army, wanted to serve your country, wanted to be in this space, and for the first 6 weeks is to happen. What is that next chapter of your life like?
I mean, my entire future was taken away from me, and I still use that terminology, and I've spoken about this many times with my psychologist over the years. It's like, you see these movies, and it's about some kid who was like this U-Butte football player, right? And he gets a scholarship, and he goes to play like college football, whatever it is, right? And that's his whole life, and then he breaks his leg. And then for the next 30, 40 years, he's this miserable fucking person because he's lost his... I was very much like that because I didn't have a backup plan. That was my plan.
That was your identity.
And I had a very strong sense of identity before that incident happened. And then it was like, well, what do I do now? Who am I outside of this? Because this is all I ever wanted. So it was very, very confusing.
As well, like with
and so young,
army, like the benefits that come with it, like that kind of can set your whole life up if that's your career path.
Yeah.
Was there any compensation or anything from
the time,
government or like? At
the time, no. I didn't. It's funny, when I handed my resignation, they said to me, oh, look, you're actually, you're really good. You're a natural born leader. Would you consider moving to the Air Force or Navy? I'm just like, no. Like I am Army. I'm not, I wouldn't, to me, that was like being a traitor. I would never just swap forces like that. But the way that they dealt with it was just kind of like, oh, well, just change. It's like, well, no. The military has provided this, has caused this. So I'm out kind of thing. They literally put me in a taxi and were like, see ya. That was it. I think my mum got a letter, some fucking bullshit letter, saying that, I did really well and it just wasn't the right career path for me. Like it was so...
Like a reference for your next career path.
Yeah, it was just so ridiculous. But that was it. So I very much left and there was no support. I didn't even know about Department of Veteran Affairs. I didn't know. They didn't give me this is in 1998. I didn't get like an exit.
Yeah, here's how you can go and get support after what happened.
No, there was nothing. Yeah. It was just kind of like, see ya. Thanks, but see ya. And it was just crazy because up until then, the amount of support and everything I'd been given, especially being a scholarship when I was astronomical, and they'd obviously spent a shitload of money on me, but then it was just kind of like, yep, bye, see it, yeah.
And you said the guy got charged and
Yeah.
everything. Was that like at that?
At the time, yeah. So
straight
it
away?
happened straight away because I made
Yeah.
sure, I was like, well, this, So he was, I think it was like 11 charges all up, and he pled guilty to every single one of them.
Did he end up in military prison or?
He would have been discharged.
And that's it?
No, I think he served time.
Discharged and then gets charged in the...
No, so he would have served his time and then would have been discharged, officially discharged.
So what, they have like a prison just for...
Yeah, so at the
military
academy
prison,
he was being held and the prison barracks there, yeah. I mean, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that I don't remember and
Yeah,
the
of course,
details,
that's a
what
long
have
time
you.
ago.
Yeah, like I was even trying to track down that female lawyer, no idea.
Yeah, wow.
Because they control everything. Even trying to get... When I was going through the process just in the last 5 years, me trying to get information from Freedom of Information, I couldn't get.
I've heard the freedom of information is just like the biggest joke ever. There's like one person that works on it in the country.
I haven't been able to get
response
anything at all.
about your own case.
About my own case.
Of sexual assault. Like it's just like, there's so many systems that are so backwards.
Yeah.
That's
So,
why
I mean, all I know, he served time and then he would have been discharged and that's it, no more. Yeah. So I have no idea what happened to him and honestly, I don't give a fuck, but yeah.
But it's just crazy. Like, I don't know. The whole service for your country, I understand, is so important, but I just look at it through the view of like, these people are meant to go and train their life and go and put their life on the line because these people at the top have arguments that can't get along with each other.
Yeah.
So they send like pawns of like
Yeah.
the chessboard to go and, you know, and God bless and so much respect for all of our servicemen and women.
We just don't get looked after.
Well, you don't get looked after. And it's like, just because these people can't get along, we can send a bunch of people off to die.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what? Like if all the politicians had to be on the front line, dare I say, they'd solve their, solve their differences very quickly compared to having to just send, you know,
and I think also like the year that I served, 1998, females weren't allowed to be in the front line. So I was doing all the same training as the males, but I couldn't be in certain corps because of the fact that I was a female. That's changed now, but back then that was the situation.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So what comes next for you? You're 20
So
years old.
I went
you've
home.
Had what you said, your future ripped out of your hands.
Went home to my hometown to where my parents were, my mum and my stepdad were at the time, and I got a job. I got a full-time job because there was nothing really else for me to do. I was fucking miserable.
Did you have any
but I didn't have any skills
resources
or qualifications
from the army after being...
No, they gave me nothing.
They pled guilty to...
That's what I mean, absolutely. They literally put me in a taxi.
No mental health plan, no
nothing. No, nothing like that. I was never told anything. I didn't know that I could get support. I was not made aware. And back then, it's not as if the information was readily available either. And because I didn't have any family, there was no... We didn't know. We literally didn't know.
You can't just go Google search. Like,
there was nothing like that. There was like I said, there was no exit pack where they're like, oh, you can call, blah, blah, blah. There was nothing made available to me at all. So I was like, okay, well, that's over. Now I've just got to start my life again and work out what I want to be. And that was very hard because there was nothing else really. So I got a full-time job. And that first year out of the army was when the mental health issues started to raise its ugly head, although at the time I didn't know. So I had my first, what I now know was a first manic episode, almost a year later, almost to the day, a year later, but I didn't know what it was.
PTSD.
It was, I was in a relationship. And we'd been to have dinner at my parents' and we were driving home and something snapped and all of a sudden I just wanted to get out of the car. And he was like, well, we're driving, just wait. And I couldn't wait. So I freaked out and was trying to get out of the car. And that's basically the first manic episode that I had. But again, I didn't know, didn't understand, just thought I was just having a difficult time, whatever. I then moved to Brisbane after 2 weeks after that. I think it was very, very fleeting. Like I said, I was in a relationship and he was like, well, what's happening? And I was like, well, I'm moving to Brisbane. If you want to come, that's fine, but don't move with me. I'm doing my own thing kind of thing. And I just started working. I think I moved to Brisbane. I was working at a bar at the time. And I think that's when I decided to do some study and I ended up doing a diploma in paralegal studies and I was working hospitality. All that time I was dealing with mental health illness.
Had you been seeing a psychologist or getting any help at all? Because like you said, this is like
I never
99, 2000.
When I gave my statement to the police the military police about my assault, that was the one and only time I talked about what happened until 2019.
Wow.
My mum knew something had happened. I gave her enough information that sort of appeased her because she knew something was happening, but I never told her what had happened.
So your mum wasn't even there for support in the court case and
She wasn't
stuff?
allowed to be.
Really? It was just your one external police and then everything internal?
Yeah. It wasn't external police. No,
I mean, no. Sorry, one
police.
external lawyer. You said you wanted a civilian lawyer.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. So it wasn't like it was a dirty secret. It was like, I've dealt with it. He was charged. I've done my piece. Now I just need to move on with my life. That was very
felt
much
like you dealt with it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was a young girl. I didn't know.
You wanted to push it in your past to move forward into your future.
Yeah. So I just didn't talk about it. Plus, being an only child, raised by a single mother, and my mum and I have always been very close. We still are incredibly close. I'd made the decision that I just didn't want her to know what had happened. I wanted to protect her from knowing what had happened to me. And I thought that I was doing the right thing. For decades, I thought I was doing the right thing.
I feel for you. Now, with what you know now, and there's probably therapy you've done, which we will catch up to 2019 or onwards, do you look back and wish you let 100%. Her carry the burden with you a little bit more? And I'm sure she would as well now that she knows more.
Life would have been very different for me, 100%. I mean, we can't turn back time. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. All
but
those
this
kind
can
of
also
things.
help anyone listening right now or anyone.
Speak up. If something happens to you, speak up, get the help. Whether it's, you don't know what's going to happen, but you need to talk. You need to talk about it. You need to talk about it.
So let's talk about those early years in the 2000s and what was life like? You're carrying on to some serious trauma that you've opened up about, but then almost buried back down after you.
Yeah. So I basically, in my head, it was like, well, that's happened. That's gone. I just need to now focus on my future or whatever my future was going to be. And I was living with the very stereotypical telltale signs of living with bipolar type 1. Manic episodes, promiscuity, excessive drug, alcohol, all that sort of stuff. But I was living alone, so I was able to hide. I was high functioning. So I was able to hide it from a lot of people. There were things happening and people were like, why is she doing that? And blah, blah, blah. But, I wasn't seeking help. You don't go to the doctor when you only go to the doctor when you feel sick or you don't feel well. When you're living with bipolar mania, you feel good. It's toxic good, but you don't, there was no reason.
In control.
There was no reason for me to go to the doctor. So I was living, like that for a really long time. And it wasn't until 2008 after I had my first suicide attempt, which stemmed from mania. Don't know if you're familiar with this, but most people who have bipolar only attempt suicide when they're manic, not when they're on the crash kind of thing. And that was when I was officially diagnosed with bipolar and complex PTSD, but it was still not linked to the assault because I didn't talk about it. Really? So when I was seeing the doctor, when I was diagnosed, they ask you questions. Is there a history of drug and alcohol in your family? Well, no, there wasn't at all in my family. Do you smoke cigarettes? All this sort of stuff. They never ask you, have you experienced any kind of abuse, sexual abuse or assault or anything like that? That's not a question that they ask. And I feel like it's definitely a fucking question they should be asking.
That should be the first question they asked.
Right? But it was never, so it wasn't again linked until my assault until much, much later. So I
feel like it's like the biggest part of your story, really.
Yeah.
And I guess you're trying to,
and I would never have lied about it. Like, I mean, if someone had asked me directly, has something happened to you? I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. But I was never asked that question. And it wasn't something I would volunteer.
Yeah.
Because I'm not medically qualified to know that there's a link,
Yeah. Well, it's just like, it's such a big part of your story for a doctor not to have caught on to that earlier. So what was when they, diagnosed you with the bipolar and what did they link it back to? What triggered it?
There was no actual link. There's no history of mental illness in my family. So I wasn't abusing the drugs and alcohol until later. So it wasn't linked to that either. So there was no real link, no real cause, just life at the time. So they prescribed me with lithium, which is the primary medication they give people for bipolar. Yeah,
wow. And how did your life change once you were diagnosed and began to
it's interesting because when I was given the diagnosis, there was a level of relief. It's like, okay, now we know why I do the things that I do. It's not me. There's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that relief. But then it was a case of, well, shit, if I'm doing this because I have bipolar, then what's me and what's the illness? Because I was a teenager. I was still developing, you know, mentally and emotionally and all that sort of stuff. So I was still young, even though at 28 I was, you know. So I just did all the things that the doctors told me I was supposed to do. I went and saw psychologists. I took my medication. I did all the things, but I didn't get any better.
And still no one, when you started seeing psychologists, asked you for your background, your history.
They knew about the army.
They knew about the army, but when they said, why are you not there anymore? You didn't.
No, because I didn't leave because of the assault. Because the assault happened in February. I didn't discharge until like August. So I think there was a part of my brain. I'd also forgotten about it. It had been pushed so far back down that I just didn't. It wasn't something that happened. It was kind of just
But you kind of did leave because of the assault, right?
I left. I left because of the way that I was treated.
Okay.
Because everyone treated me. The guys treated me with cotton gloves. They knew something had happened, and obviously they knew that there was, you know, that this guy had been charged and what have you. So I think guys were scared that I was going to like rat on them or whatever, which was just fucking insane.
Yeah. If you don't do anything illegal, you're not going to get rat
on
them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the reason why I left.
Okay.
So that was never really sort of discussed. And I think because of the way I dealt with my trauma, I just ignored it. That had happened. I dealt with it. It was never to be spoken about again, kind of thing. So as the years went on, my health, my physical and mental health just got worse. The medication caused me to put on weight because I was taking prescription. Like I never abused my medication. I was prescribed like 22 pills a day, which was a mix of psychotropic, like uppers, downers, sleepers, stabilizers, all the things. Mm-hmm. So that's what I was taking. That's what I was told I was going to have to take every day for the rest of my life to live.
And what were you doing through this period for work?
I was working, again, because I was high functioning, I was still able to work. I had a really good job as a sales and marketing manager for a property developer in Brisbane. I was really good at my job. I had a lot of respect from my peers. They didn't know that I was unwell. Like it wasn't something that I talked about. Again, back in those days, mental health wasn't really something that was really openly spoken about. And I was in a relationship that lasted 2.5 years. I ended that. I realized then that I needed to be on my own. I couldn't have anyone else in my life because I was, even though I knew that I had this complex mental illness that was incurable. I thought I was managing it well. I wasn't at all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
So where's the turning point come? Because I feel like now it looks like you're in a very healthy, happy place.
Yeah. So from 2008 to 2014, I had 3 suicide attempts. And it's interesting. I can talk about it very easily because I never wanted to end my life. I knew, even though I had these attempts, I knew how final that was. I never wanted to die. I was so distressed mentally and emotionally. I just wanted that to stop. And I think there's a bit of confusion when people talk about suicide and stuff like that. But that's something that's really important for me that I speak about. I knew how final dying was. I never wanted that. I just wanted the chaos to stop. And the medication wasn't doing that. So I didn't have any other options, you know.
And you ended up in hospital after these suicide attempts?
No. So at the time I was in a long-term relationship. I had started dating someone, would have been beginning of 2013. And that extra stress of being in a committed relationship actually was really, really bad for me. 2014 would have been the 1st December 2014. I was 120 kilos. So I had put on so much weight as a result of the medication and just bad lifestyle choices and all the things, that I was actually hospitalized with lithium poisoning. Wow. So I had never been to hospital for my mental health. I didn't go to hospital until I had these physical symptoms. I had hallucinating. The medication had basically completely poisoned my blood. So I was admitted to hospital 1st December with blood poisoning, and I was in hospital for a week, and they flushed me of all the medication. So I was finally able to think clearly.
A little bit of thought.
Yeah, because my brain, I had no brain. It was just major brain fog. I wasn't able to think properly. I couldn't make decisions because I was just so foggy from all the medication. Yeah. So that week in hospital, although it was horrible, that's the start of this new
Healing.
chapter of my life. I remember saying to the doctors, like, I haven't had an episode this whole week. So what does that mean? Like, if I leave the hospital,
need the medication,
do I need this medication? And they were like, well, you've done so well. So if your GP says it's okay, then we give you thumbs up, no more meds. So I can, hand on heart, I've been psychotropic medication free since then.
Wow, 10 years. Congratulations.
Yeah. So that for me was proof.
And you felt better since being offered. So
oh my God.
You were just given this diagnosis once based on a lack of questioning to understand the root of the trauma. And then for 10 years you were put on these array of pharmaceuticals, which would have probably cost you and the Medicare system a lot of money for a long time.
I was going to the doctors weekly, psychologists, psychiatrists, the whole works.
And none of them got to the root of...
Not until 2019.
So how did...
Actually, 2018.
Let's talk about the 4 years leading into that, from being off the medication, how your life changed.
Yeah, so from after I left hospital, because I had quite a lot of damage done to my body as a result of the blood poisoning. I couldn't speak properly. My vision was really blurry. I had really bad muscle issues. I couldn't walk properly. So it took a good 6 months to recover just from all those physical ailments as a result of the blood lithium poisoning.
And plus, what are you, if you don't mind asking now, you're probably at 60 kilos and you're at 120. Yeah.
So that was, I knew healthy body, healthy mind. Yeah. As the fog started to clear, me, who I am at my core, she started to come back. And obviously she's strong and she was capable, because that's how I was able to get into the Australian Defence Force Academy scholarship winner. So that strength started to come back, and that's when I was like, I need to take control of my life. I have to stop relying on these specialists that don't know me. No one knows me better than me. So I knew that I needed to get healthy, and my physical health was obviously 120 kilos. I knew I needed to lose weight. So that was a start. So I hated going to the gym, so I just started walking. I got a beautiful Ridgeback dog who's now 7. She's my absolute pride and joy. So I was walking. Every single day I'd walk for an hour. I got rid of all the frozen packaged food that I had in the house, and I started buying fresh food only. So just those 2 big things.
Diet and exercise is the foundation that most of us get wrong.
It's like, it's so simple, but you're not actually taught this. When you're never really taught this. And it blows my mind now, obviously doing what I do, I believe it should be taught in schools. 100%. Learning how to regulate your emotions, all that sort of stuff, but that's a whole nother story. But yeah, so I stopped listening to all the white noise. I stopped listening to what everyone else had to say, and I just started listening to my body. And then obviously as the weight started to come off, I started to feel stronger. I started to realize that I could make decisions, and they were the right decisions, and do the right things for me. And as a result, 2018, I launched a business. I had a PR and marketing agency that was very successful, but the stress of that sort of triggered another episode. And in 2018, I ended up making the decision to spend time at a private clinic.
Okay.
So that was very scary for me, because I'd always said that I never wanted to go to hospital for my mental health, but I didn't have any other resources available, and everything that I was doing wasn't enough. And you're
still off the medication there? And
still off the medication, okay, yeah.
I want to do something but not go on the medication.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing so much, my kind of reflection and perspective of your story, and I'm sure there's so many people who unfortunately end up in your situation from sexual assault or from some sort of assault and a complex trauma that, for one, is misdiagnosed, and people just get diagnosed because then they listen to what the professionals say. And what I think is so important is getting up. But it sounds like you did have second opinions and different people, and just no one realised, because I want to catch up to now. Once you did go back in and check yourself into a facility, for one, how was that process? Because I've had other people who have been to, is it rehab or is it
so I went to
mental illness facility?
It was a private mental
psychiatric
health
facility.
Clinic. No, it wasn't like it's funny, because I'd always had this perception of like a crazy hospital, where there's like people throwing shit in the walls, all that sort of stuff. It's not like that at all. This was like a 5-star bougie private clinic in Southport. I had my own suite. At that stage, I was under the care of Department of Veteran Affairs. So
Okay, so by then
in
they've
2000,
come
yeah,
into
so 2000, actually it would have been 2019. I
Yeah.
got a bit confused with my years. My mum was single. She was dating and she had a date with this guy who was an advocate for veterans. And when he was explaining what she did, what he was doing for work, and mum was like, oh, my daughter was in the army and, something had happened to her, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, why isn't she under the care of DVA? Mum's like, I didn't know anything about it. So he was like, call this number. So that was the start. So when I went to RSL in Southport,
yeah,
and I met with this amazing lieutenant in the Air Force, retired lieutenant in the Air Force, put in my claim. It happened so fucking quickly. It was like they were waiting for me.
Wow.
It was like DVA were waiting.
And was he
for my
one of the
claim.
first person that you told the full story to?
Yep.
Like when did?
And at the time I was actually engaged to my fiance and I hadn't even told him what happened.
Wow.
So I never told the details, but it was enough information for them to obviously go to DVA, and then straight away I was under the care of DVA and all that sort of stuff. So that was the start of the process. And then when my mental health deteriorated, I think having to relive the trauma of the assault and dealing with all of that is what re-triggered it.
So that's when you'd started there. Your business is going pretty well, but then you start talking about it to try and, understand why you started
the assault wasn't. I mentioned that something had happened, and they were obviously through their records, they were able to track. To track that it was that there was something
serious happened.
Yeah.
So it's a bit different when the DVA, the Veteran Affairs psychologists, have access to stuff that your general psychologist wouldn't have.
Yeah, so when you first do your claim, they obviously were able to access all of my military files and all that sort of stuff. So that's why things moved really, really quickly for me, quicker than anyone else I've ever spoken to. So they had like a veteran
psychiatric place that you could go to?
No, so it was a private.
Fund it?
Yeah, so they just funded it. So
Amazing.
I went to Southport Private Clinic. It was a 2.5 week stay. And just having that break away from life, away from my business, away from my fiance, away from everything really helped. How the association between my complex mental illness and the assault was made was that during that stay, I was in my room, and our doors had to be always unlocked, but the nurses would be coming in to check your bloods and all that sort of stuff, right? So I remember I was in my underwear, lying on my bed watching television, and the door opened and I just assumed it was a nurse coming to do her checks, and it was another patient. And I went into fight mode. I launched at this guy, get the fuck out of my room, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I thought this was my room. And I knew damn well there's no way you could confuse your rooms. That was when the link was made.
So that was a big trigger for you.
Hardcore trigger.
And then when did you... So then you started speaking.
So that's when I started speaking to the psychologist, psychiatrist, and then that's when it all...
And did they start putting like two and two together and go like, hey, I think this is really the underlying root cause of why you've, been diagnosed with bipolar? Yeah, because I'd never had, like I said, that one incident with that guy was the one and only time in my life where I've had an inappropriate experience with a male. I've always had really positive experiences with males. And I think my recovery, a lot of women that I speak to, a lot of sexual assault survivors say, how can you be so sexy and how can you do this and how can you post bikinis, photos of yourself in bikinis? And I'm like, well, one bad thing happened to me a long time ago by one bad man. I would never assume or think that every guy is going to do that. So I don't have a fear of males. Yeah. Which is rare with a lot of sexual assault survivors. Yeah, wow. So once you finish at that clinic for the couple of weeks, end of 2019, what's the future look like? Do you feel like since then you began healing and
100%? I realized that, and I was almost 40 then. So I was like, if I am going to I've got at least another 40 years on this planet if I look after myself. Yeah. How do I want to spend it? I ended my relationship with my fiance and I started again at 40.
Wow. Talk me through the weight loss, because I feel like there's obviously so many complex things throughout your story, but that are very not hard to relate to, because I'm sure there's definitely been, some victims of sexual assault or just assault in general that might listen to this podcast or know someone of it, which they can probably, hopefully be inspired by your strength to, still be here with us today, but also to speak up, but also to probably get a secondary opinion and try your best to be able to reflect on what's actually gone on in your life. Yeah. But I think there's also going to be people who, have, for their own reasons, put on a lot of weight in their life and really struggled, whether it is because of medication, whether it is because of lifestyle choice.
I mean, and mine was a mix of everything.
Whether it is because of abuse and just feel uncomfortable getting outside and, working out, or because they've been bullied and they've been told this. there's so many reasons
many
why
reasons,
people
yeah.
are, out of shape and overweight and,
I mean, I think for me, one was obviously I knew I had this complex mental illness and I knew healthy body, healthy mind. If I needed to get my mind strong and healthy, I needed to get my body strong and healthy. And I had, as a result of the blood poisoning, I developed some permanent medical issues, physical medical issues. Like I have hypothyroidism as a result of that blood poisoning. I'm lactose intolerant. I had developed IBS. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that I had to like fight, which is counterintuitive to when you're losing weight, like all of these additional things. But I was so determined to live a better life and to enjoy the rest of my life the way I wanted on my terms. I think that mindset change was my driving force.
Yeah, right.
I had a lot of people in my life that I'm not going to say were toxic, but they probably liked the fact that I was in a victim mindset. And it's very easy to live in a victim mindset. And I did for decades. It's so easy.
Yeah.
And I was sick of being that person. So I literally, like I said, at 40 years old, I was like, I need to relearn everything. So I realized I didn't have a good understanding about food and what I was putting in my mouth and what it was doing to my body.
Yeah.
So I did a certificate in food and nutrition. That was the starting point of me kind of like really taking control of managing my own life so that I was in charge.
Yeah, good on you. Because I think that was kind of where I was going to go with this question. What advice would you have for someone who is, out of shape, wants to lose some weight, wants to get themselves to a place where, they can enjoy every day of the rest of their life? Not to say that if you're overweight, you can't enjoy your life.
No, that's right.
But enjoy the life that you really want.
Yeah.
So obviously the cornerstones, I think, are nutrition and exercise. But from what you know now, what was the most important of the two, or what is some advice around those?
I remember one of the things that I'd always been told about, like when you lose weight or to be healthy, it's, mindset, exercise and food.
Yeah.
And the percentages that I was always told that it was, like you need to exercise and go to the gym. But I loved exercising. I loved being active. I loved fitness. Didn't enjoy the gym.
No one who's overweight would enjoy going to the gym.
For so many reasons.
I'm a professional athlete and I still find it not awkward, but I still find it triggering going to I've always been lucky enough to train in like a gym that's like for surfers with like strength and conditioning, top end coaches. And if I just go to your local gym, like I feel like there's eyeballs on me and feel judged. And I'm like, so I can't imagine how difficult it must be for someone out of shape.
And I'd been working as a fashion stylist in the fashion industry. So I'd put myself as a 120 kilo mentally ill woman in a fucking absurd position where I was dealing with size 8 model. It was the worst possible thing for me. It was such a head fuck. But what I think the biggest thing for me was I really needed to get clear on what my values were. Until I got clear on what my values were, nothing was going to change because I had no guiding point in my life. I realized adventure was a value of mine. I'd always been adventurous. I'd done that from when I was a kid. That's why I joined the army in the first place. But I had done nothing adventurous in my life for fucking decades. So that was really important to me. So, I bought a jet ski. I started dancing. I did all the things that I did when I was a kid that I loved and brought me so much joy. I started to do again as an adult. And that was the biggest turning point, is really working out what my values were and using that as my internal compass to everything that I do. So now all the stuff that I do is very much in alignment with my values.
Which I think is so important. So what advice would you have for, a woman in her early 40s, late 30s, any time of their age, but in an unhappy place, a place where they feel, like they maybe are living in a bit of a victim mindset, where they are looking for excuses, where they are looking for people to blame, because we can all look to that.
Oh, it's easy.
And there's some people with far more, like you, out of everyone, like you could happily just blame the rest of your life.
And I did for a long time. And it was so easy for me to do that. And then I was like, this is not like I said, it was very much that realization that I still had another 40 plus years, fingers crossed, left on this planet. And I wanted to just fucking truly, truly enjoy that. How that was going to happen, I didn't actually know. Like, people say you could have a 5-year plan, 10-year plan. I just needed a plan for the next 24 hours. You know what I mean? Like I had very much been living day to day, but I needed to change that day to day. So once I worked out what I really wanted to be doing, how I wanted to be spending my days.
How'd you do that though? Because I feel like a lot of people don't even know that and don't know where to start. How did you start?
A lot of the stuff I actually learned when I did those 2.5 week stay in hospital. So we learned a lot about, understand that what our values are and all that sort of thing. And then being truly honest with yourself. Values. Like really going, okay, well, things were happening with people in my life. I couldn't understand why it was bothering me. It was affecting my values. I didn't know.
You'd make excuses for them and it goes against your values.
Exactly. So I got really clear on my values. I then started to make a plan with my days, how I wanted to spend my days, who I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up in this world, how I wanted people to
the values, those actions each day.
Exactly. And that was my blueprint. So I started making sure that travel was a big part as well. So I started organizing, to do little things. At the time, I wasn't in a very good financial place like I am now, but I did what I could within my boundaries.
Yeah.
And that obviously just snowballs to the point where, it's, the life that I have now is very much a life I've created.
Yeah, and you're living, and it was through some of the most difficult times, in your life when it comes to global, what's going on in the world with COVID and stuff, because it sounds like really your story starts of you living for yourself again at sort of 2019, 2020 when,
just before COVID,
we go through some really challenging times. So talk me through the last 4 years, because now you're a cuddle therapist. How did you find that?
Yes.
You're this person bringing joy to so many people's lives, trying to, be a light in this world rather than, a shadow in your own world. How does someone get there? Because I'm sure there's plenty of women living right now in, denial of, that victim mindset, living in denial of like, I am living to my values, but I really do your actions actually live to those values?
Absolutely.
Or do you just say they're your values? Do you say you love adventure? When was the last time you went on a weekend away? You say
this is the most common thing. I realized I had thought I was a particular type of person, but I really wasn't. And I think it's very common for when people get to their 30s and 40s, if they're not living their life in alignment with their values, they resort back to what they were when they were a kid. Like when I've been single for 5 years, and over that period of time, I've obviously attempted to date and what have you. And you start chatting to a guy and like, oh yeah, I do this and I do that. I'm like, oh cool. When was the last time you went on an adventure? Oh, well, I actually haven't been out on a boat or blah, blah, blah since I was 18. I'm like, and I realized, fuck, this is what I and so many people were doing, like living in a past version of themselves they want to be again.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is just to take action. I know it's scary, but small steps.
So what was those small steps for you? Because now you have your own business.
So I mean, having my own business again was very scary, because the last time I had my own business, my mental health deteriorated, but that wasn't because of the business. It was because of the life that I had at the time. I've worked really, really hard to make new friends. So as a result, I now run speed friending events, and I have a speed friending group where women can connect with other women to make friendships. I obviously coach weight loss and stuff, because the best way to learn from someone about losing weight is someone who's actually lost weight and kept it off.
Nutrition,
So I think that's one of my big superpowers, the fact that I lost 60 kilos, but I have maintained this weight for years consistently. And it's proof that I know what I'm doing and what I do works. I host bucket list experiences and adventures because why not? Everyone needs a bit of adventure. So all the stuff that I do in my day-to-day life, I've turned into a
life by design.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Yeah. And the cuddle therapy,
let's talk about the cuddle therapy.
As I said to you earlier, so I was watching Billions, TV show Billions, and they had a professional cuddler on the episode. And it was a very dramatic episode where this professional cuddler came in and sat down. Within a few minutes, she had this guy crying and what have you. And I was like, that's really cool. That can't be a real thing. Researched, it was a real thing. So I did my certification. So you actually do have to go through proper training and all that sort of stuff.
To be a cuddle therapist.
Yes, to be a cuddle therapist. And I go by a book called the Cuddle Sutra, which is just like the Kama Sutra, but 101 different cuddle positions.
Wow.
And that was something I launched that 2 years ago, and I went viral internationally. And now I get to, have some amazing clients. And I also obviously do workshops and that kind of stuff around cuddle therapy and the benefits of human touch.
Let's talk about it now. You
Yes.
got 10 minutes to give my audience a bit of a spiel on why cuddling is important, the bit of the science behind it, and how they can, utilize cuddles more in their life.
Absolutely.
But in a way, I just love the science-backed stuff, because it's like, gratitude's great, mindfulness is great. But when you can understand the neuroscience behind it, which we chatted about briefly before we started talking, like cuddle and touch and this is backed in neuroscience, and there's so much great research behind it. So can you explain to me, where did you do your certificate, by the way?
So I did my certificate. There's a place in Australia called Cuddle Therapy Australia. So that's where I did my certification and everything. And then obviously I have to be insured and all that sort of stuff as well. So starting at the beginning, when you're born, what's the very first thing that happens as soon as you're born?
You get held by your parents.
Bingo.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays, obviously with COVID and rules and stuff, it's not as easy, but for generations
Let's
and
put the baby on the
generations,
chest of
for that bonding, because they need to have that skin on skin contact. Scientifically, obviously our skin is the barometer to our emotional well-being. We detect heat, pain, cold, all that sort of stuff through our skin. And it actually, when we hug, when we touch, whether we're touching ourselves or whether we're touching another person, it actually releases oxytocin, which is the feel-good love chemical. And that's why scientifically we are supposed to at least have up to a 30-second hug, whether it's in 10-second increments throughout the day, for us to maintain our emotional well-being. Wow. So I obviously coach self-hugging as well every single morning. I mean, I'm still single, so I hug myself every day. I mean, if you can't hug yourself, touch yourself, love yourself, how can you expect anyone else to do the same thing for you?
Have you ever heard of havening?
I have heard of havening.
Yeah.
I have, and very similar with the tapping and stuff like that. I mean,
I've actually got a session at 3:30 this afternoon
really?
with a friend of mine, Elle McBride. She's been on the podcast before about havening, where it's all like,
I actually think I've seen her.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, so self-touch and self-regulation in every capacity is so important, but a lot of people just, for whatever reason, they either can't do it or they don't have the accessibility to hug someone else. So that's where I step in. So obviously it's a completely non-sexual service. It's actually a very maternal service. I find that my clients get quite emotional during sessions because, you know, there's kind of, you know, retreating back into
held for some people, like weren't neglected as kids, 100%. Or not even if they're neglected. Like you might have had really loving parents that just weren't
naturally affectionate or demonstrative.
Naturally affectionate. Yeah. So when you're held for the first time in 20 years by someone that isn't your partner and it isn't, you know, coming under the guise of a sexual interaction, then it's like, I can imagine there's so much release for some people.
It's very, very powerful.
You feel safe, you feel comfortable, you feel connected.
Yep. Absolutely. And there are, like you said, there's scientific benefits of hugging. I mean, it obviously releases pain and inflammation, reduces pain and inflammation, reduces stress. It can actually help you process your thoughts and emotionally regulate yourself as well. So the benefits of touching yourself every single day, whether it's holding your own hand or stroking your arms or touching your legs, is just incredibly beneficial.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'll have to leave. I will obviously leave in the show notes everything to your website around the cuddle therapy if people do want to learn how to show that more self-love, learn how to show more love to their partner, to their friends, or their family. So important because I just love that feeling when you're like, you know, you have like a hug, like hello to someone, but there's a very different thing. Like
absolutely. I think if you think about the last time you hugged someone, like we obviously hugged when we met today, you know, hugging is actually a completely non-sexual thing at all. Most people, when you are having sex, you're not usually cuddling and hugging, exactly. You know what I mean? So, you know, when you're feeling good, you want to hug someone.
It just shows like, I'm comfortable with you.
Yeah, exactly. So I think everyone should be hugging more often. A lot of people don't have the opportunities to be able to hug, you know, FIFO workers, emergency, you know, people, that sort of stuff. So it's really rewarding for me to be able to provide this service. I think there's a bit of confusion with some people because I am a sexual assault survivor. But again, I also believe that if this person was getting the physical attention that they had have needed, they might not have turned to doing what they did to me. Yeah,
wow. Yeah, it's your story is so fascinating. I just think it's such a beautiful story of redemption. I think it's a beautiful story of misdiagnosing and the medical industry. It's a beautiful story of, you know, the harsh truths of the military space. You know, there's so many complex things throughout your story that I'm so grateful that you shared. And I hope everyone listening feels maybe a little bit more understanding and empathetic towards people who have complex bipolar, have complex mental illnesses, that it's not their fault. It's very often, it never is it somebody's fault, but, you know, very often it is because of a complex trauma that had nothing to, you know, do with them, but it's made them, you know, live this life, and then they get misdiagnosed because of their fear of not volunteering something because it is, you know, such a big challenge in their life. So hopefully everyone listening, for one, if you know you are going through something really challenging, you have in the past and you haven't spoken up, hopefully today's episode gives you the strength to, you know, talk to someone about it, whether it be your partner, whether it be a psychologist, you know, whether it be about the police if you haven't, you know, come clean about something. Also, I think being open to seeking like different help. Sounds like, you know, you definitely got help, but maybe they didn't ask the right questions. So getting secondary opinions might have sped you up on your recovery journey. And then, yeah, just like the information hopefully around military and being able to, you know, seek help through different services is so important. But I will leave in the show notes everything about your cuddle therapy, about your social media, if people want to learn more about your weight loss journey and they are looking to lose weight and work with someone who has kept it off or is looking for that more connection through cuddle therapy. I'll leave that all in the show notes. But it's been a beautiful chat. I do finish the conversation with the same question for everyone. So what does being a good human mean to Missy Robinson?
Being a good human means giving back. I think for me, my experience that I've had, there were so many people who chose not to help me when they could have, has really forced me to want to help as many as I possibly can. So that's being a good human, is just giving back.
Yeah, I agree. And there's, once again, so much science behind kindness. By being kind to people, it releases serotonin and oxytocin as well.
It's actually really easy to be kind and to give. And I think one of the biggest things for my story is hope. There is hope. There really is hope.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. It's been an amazing chat. I'm going to give you a big cuddle to finish.
Yay!
Oh, you're the best.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for jumping on Good Humans.
Yes, absolutely.